What I thought, I would let you peruse through this. You may see something.
I saw the one that you want, the one I want us to talk about right here.
Which one is that?
That's the contributions we make. So this what it is going to be, guys. The contributions we make toward the value of others far exceeds anything we can give to ourselves.
Right. Yes, let me tell you what provoked me to write that. I was realizing last week there's a young lady that's coaching 14-year-olds. And she's new at this. She's a very young lady. I think she's in her early 20s. And I said, what is the biggest struggle that you have with the kids? She says, motivation. And it wasn't like that when I played sports. Everybody was highly motivated. And, so I got thinking about it. And as I've been thinking about it, I started thinking about what do I personally take a lot of pleasure in, and always have. And it's been to be able to help other people to do more with who they are for themselves. It has never been for me to obtain something for me. Now, and I look at our society today and our culture, and there's so many things that people are trying to gravitate to that are materialistic, and they're not fulfilling at all. They don't know it. So I'm thinking, how do you get people to create a transition so that they really see that by truly valuing and giving things to other people that will help them grow in life, how gratifying that is to themselves. And that's what provoked that. So, like when you think about how your day is going to go, how much of the day is built on what you're doing for your own pleasure versus what you're looking to do for someone else. Mm-hmm. And that goes for both from a behavioral perspective as well as a materialistic perspective. I'm quite materialistic. You've been in my house. You saw my tractors, all the implements I have to take care of the property. All of that stuff is meaningful to me. And I get excited about thinking about what's the next tool that I could get so that I could do something. Okay? But more important than that, when I look at it, is the gratification that I have had over the last 2 weeks, or actually it's been 5 weeks, that we did something with Journey Enhancement with a group of people. You can't match that gratification with anything. I would love to have other people to try to accomplish that, because if that were the case, I believe it would start bringing us closer together as a culture, as opposed to by wanting self-gratification and materialistic things, it does nothing to bring us together. It isolates us and it creates boundaries so that don't talk to me now, I'm busy doing for something for myself.
To kind of add to what you said, one of the words that jumped out at me was motivation.
Yes.
And I talked to somebody before, a good friend of mine, and he talked about motivation. He said, motivation is fleeting. And
fleeting, going away.
And I was thinking to myself,
yeah.
I was like, wow. And I asked him, okay, keep in mind, because in the society that we were raised in, like you said, when you played sports, I played sports, it was all the way, you need some motivation.
Well, yeah.
But that motivation was depending on the goal that was placed before the child. You see what I'm saying?
You're absolutely right.
So when the motivation is fleeting, that's because once the goal is accomplished, what else is next?
Right. Now, motivation is fleeting, and I think it's fleeting for a very specific reason. Okay. When I was growing up, when I was 12 years old, like I have said before, I had 3 uncles that served in World War II. We had the Cold War. We had air raid drills in school where we were taught to get under your desk, okay? So there was a worldwide fear, that chaos could break out at any time. So what did that fear do? It motivated us to want to be prepared. Today, There isn't anything out there that I'm aware of that we know nationally that we have to be prepared if something were to happen. What are we going to do? Because we have so much and there's so little that we're really threatened about, we've become complacent. Why should I be motivated when everything that I need I can have? And what that is going to do, it's funny, I put something, somebody said something about China buying all the land in our, they're buying stuff in our country. And it's really interesting because I talked to a missionary that spent years in China before COVID. Tell me what China is like. He's pretty interesting, but the lasting thought he gave me, he says they don't do anything short term. Their thinking is in decades. They're thinking about what it's going to be like in 100 years and what they have to do in each decade to get it there. America is thinking about what can we do today to get what we want for tomorrow. So here's what's going on. This is just my understanding. China is being very patient and very slowly doing things that is going to basically take things away from this country. And we don't even feel it because it's being done at such a little at a time. But sooner or later, it's going to get to the point where something we used to have, we don't have anymore, and I didn't realize how important it was until it's missing. Okay? Well, that's, to me, has a direct correlation on how I see the fact that motivation is disappearing. What do we really need to protect in this country? There's when you take a look at global obesity, it's at an all-time high because people are not motivated to do anything about, their conditioning. So, until there's something that creates an action, there will be no motivation. Motivation is just a word. What motivation is the ability to act to gain something.
So to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, your thought that you had for the day, just the thought that you said that you had, right, is the contributions we make toward the value of others far exceeds anything we can give to ourselves, right?
Right.
Your motivation behind that statement alone causes you to step outside of your environment because you recognize or you notice something else that's going on.
I happen to be looking for it. I
right?
happen to be looking for it all the time. Yesterday, and this is how, it's a self-awareness thing. Yesterday, Diana and I went to Wendy's for a late lunch. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. There was hardly anybody there. So anyway, we get out of the car, and I go to the door. And getting out of another car quite a distance away was a black guy by himself. Now, he was so far away that there was absolutely no need for me to hold the door. But you know what I did? I waited. And I held the door. I wanted him to feel it. And he did. Now, to me, that's maybe insignificant to everybody else, but that's what I'm talking about. I did something that caused that person to realize, wow, someone else just did something for me. Now, nobody witnessed it. I'll tell you another thing. You'll love this one. Guys, this is a good one. This was fun. I forgot. So we went to IHOP in Flint on Miller Road. And it was late morning before lunchtime. And I really hadn't been to IHOP in a long time. So we went and we walked in, and there were only 2 people at tables. But I noticed that there were many tables that hadn't been bussed. And the place was it wasn't very clean. So we sat down, and I'm noticing there's one person waiting on tables, and there's 2 other people whose job wasn't to wait on tables. And when they were talking to the customers, they were also talking on their cell phones. I mean, it was deplorable. So I'm eating, and I'm watching this one young lady who's trying to take care of everything, and she can't possibly clean the table. There were 8 tables that needed to be bussed.
Ooh, 8.
You know what I did? I bust them all. I got up, I told Diana, I'm cleaning off the tables. Nobody was watching. Nobody had to know. But I have to tell you, I felt really good about that. I never bust tables before. But it was really kind of cool because, you know what, I don't know what anyone else thought. There were a couple of people there. There were some lazy guys in the kitchen that weren't helping. And I had a wonderful attitude in doing it. I wasn't trying to be critical of anybody. But I have to tell you, it made me feel really wonderful. You know, now I know how to bust tables.
So that experience that you had right there.
Yeah, then we gave her a $25 tip, by the way. The girl that was working by herself.
I don't know how to respond to that. No, I really don't. I think,
I'm just telling you what, one of the things about these conversations,
yeah,
they're not about having to prove anything to anybody.
Right.
It's just experience.
That's what
But
I love about it.
that's what we really did.
Yes.
That's the facts of it. Now, I'm not looking for anybody, oh, Rich, you're really wonderful.
No, I get that. See, the thing is, was like one of the things that, like, I've been talking to you, I've been talking to Brother James and Brother Dave about is servitude.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
really believe servitude.
I do too.
Servitude is the building blocks of something greater that God intends to provide.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Actually, servitude is, I use the word, is what God determined for us to utilize.
Yeah.
Right? Not only for our educational purpose, but for our growth overall. So when you, like, in a setting, in my mind, when I'm hearing this story, this is like, I think that there's a way that I had to bend my mind in the thinking because, here you have an establishment, right? Like as huge as a franchise as IHOP.
Yeah.
They're not vetting people enough
No.
to manage a franchise that is huge. Like in my mind, I'm sure like it's like any other company. Like once you get tiers high up in the director's position, they really don't even care about the bottom.
Apparently, let me tell you what else it did that really, really enlightened me. Because I was busting tables, I get to bring the dishes into the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
The kitchen was a filthy mess.
I'm sure.
I mean, because of what I saw in that store, I will never go back there to eat.
Understood.
It was really, really horrible. Now, what we ate was good. It looked good. It tasted, all that. But behind the scenes, and I thought, it would really be cool if I owned a restaurant, and in order to be served, you had to walk through the kitchen before you went to your table. So people could see how we operate.
That is interesting.
I wonder what our places would look like then.
That's very interesting.
You
know what, Rich, you might be on something because I worked at. Hey, Dave, didn't you say you worked at? We're not even gonna call the name, but you worked at a famous restaurant, and you said that you saw something in the morning time. What was that?
Yeah, I worked at a famous pizza place, and behind the scenes, they had a big old tub of pizza sauce, open container. Right above it was a fly trap.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean and that's what the public doesn't. They don't see that stuff.
So the thing is like, okay, I'm glad we're talking about this. See, those are motivations. See, the thing is like, what they saw in you should have motivated them to recognize their job description. And that's the thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, if an older man that is probably 40 years older than me is taking his time to actually bust these tables, that would make me feel terrible.
It didn't. That's the thing. I thought that too. I was hoping that by them seeing me do it, a couple of the guys would chip it. You know what they did? They watched me.
You know what?
Terrible.
You know what? I think, Rich, you were the type of person like, that's why we're bagging our groceries now. Somebody else did it, bag their own groceries. And they go, somebody said, that's a good idea. We're going to let the customers bag their groceries.
Yep.
Yeah. And now we're going to be going to restaurants and busting our own tables.
Busting our own tables.
Yeah.
You turned the trend now.
Yeah, well,
It's
it's kind of interesting. There are those little things that happen. This is all last week. This is a couple of incidents that occurred, last week. And one of the things that drove me to want to clean the tables was I could have sat there and Diana and I could have complained.
Yeah.
We didn't. I told her, right when I sat down and I noticed that, I said, honey, I think I should probably bust these tables. She didn't say anything. We go, no, it's not your job. No, and she, Diana's got the same mindset as me. And I thought, rather than complain about the problems we have, what can we do to contribute to the solution? And that's really what motivated me. Okay, and it wasn't that there was nobody there to recognize it. I wasn't doing it so everybody could see what I was doing. I was doing it, and my reason for doing it was twofold. I wanted to help that poor little waitress, and I was hoping these guys that were watching would participate, and they didn't.
Good shines like a light or as a beacon for others. That's really what it's meant to be.
Yeah.
So when your motivation is doing good because that's who you are, God is pleased with that.
Yeah.
Now, if you do good because you see a side benefit, well, then others may receive a benefit from the works that you're doing.
Right.
But as far as in the eyes of God, you have your reward. As
yeah, and we know inside why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing.
So now, along with that, your motivation, I know we were talking about that word, your motivation was to encourage others.
Yeah, I think when motivation is an interesting word because the real question is what drives us to motivation? Mm-hmm. Because we get motivated by acting. Mm-hmm. For example, I vacuum the house, mm-hmm. and I don't want to do it until I start vacuuming. And then all of a sudden it changes because I'm accomplishing. Okay? So the real question is, what drives a person to be motivated? Mm-hmm. And in this country today, when we think that motivation is being diminished, what needs to be out there to cause people to want to do something? And, like I said earlier, it's pretty easy to get what we want and need without having to do much to get it.
So there was an interesting conversation I had back in 2008 during the predatory lending, right? This is during the time where GM, the big three, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, were impacted financially.
I remember.
Right?
We got hurt during that time.
Yeah, most companies got impacted somehow financially.
Yeah.
And so I worked at a supplier for Hyundai at the time. And I was on a plane with one of my coworkers over to Hyundai, and my coworker's Korean. So when he went over there, it was kind of a language.
Yes.
They spoke the language, so it kind of interacted in that way. But one of the questions I asked the guys, I said, "What are you guys doing financially right now that you guys are not, as far as the company, the guys, Hyundai is not impacted?" You know what they said? It goes back to what you said about China. They said that we're observing what's going on and we're taking our time.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like
they're being deliberate.
They're being intentional.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that, like, when you look at, in my mind, when you look at a company that is huge, look at where they are now. If you look at Kia, Hyundai right now, they were real. Right. Very, very, very low as far as sales, engineering, and technology or whatnot. But now they are up there with the upper echelons.
They were determined.
Yeah, that's my word.
I didn't think this was going to turn into a financial type of a thing also, but as you were talking, I was thinking about, of course, these companies have their stocks, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, now it's a question, because you hear it from time to time when you have CEOs or the chief financial officers talking, and they talk about investors' return or shareholders' return.
Right.
So then if the motivation is to be able to do things so that you can get income now, so that people get cash right back out of their stocks and say, oh, this is what as opposed to, are we thinking, is this going to be a growth thing?
Right.
So that people aren't necessarily looking for the short-term return, but they're looking for growth in the stock and stability for the long haul. And that's what I was thinking when you were talking about China and then I guess South Korea as well.
Yeah.
Because so often we do unfortunately think in those terms. We do things that get people to respond right now.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
people will have no loyalty in your stock, for example. They have loyalty as long as they see money coming back. And then once they got that, they're going to go to the next one and
Right.
leave you. And you're just constantly doing things for the short term, trying to get that new person to invest,
Yes.
as opposed to long-term growth and stability.
Yeah, I think one of the things that gets in the way of the character we could be as a country is money. Because, money does rule.
Mhm.
When you take a look in our society, what's going on today, the more money you have, the more control and power you have, whether you like it or not. It's the way it is. And in order for that to be different, it takes a phenomenal, steadfast approach to who we are to want to take the long-term effect and really build the muscle that we need to be proud of who we could be. And that's hard to find today. It really is. I wish I had the solution for that. I don't.
As you were talking about the fight, if anything can motivate you, it will be money. That's the way that
Money
to go
is a
back.
motivator for most people.
Right,
And,
right. It is.
It's a necessity for me, but it isn't my motivator.
Well, the thing is, I'm not sure if society as we know it right now we've been educated properly to understand what money is to begin with. I think the more you are dumb and stupid concerning money, the more the money is going to come out your pockets into things
No
that
doubt
are out
about
there.
it.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, money in and of itself only has value when others determine that it has value.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
But money is necessary, right? And
Yeah.
while that type of currency is valuable, then things can happen because of it, right?
There's no doubt.
Now, I was reading just this morning, I'm preparing for tomorrow in Sunday school, how in the Bible when God gave Israel manna, right?
Yes.
And of course, he said, gather 6 days because the Sabbath day on the seventh day, so on. So on the sixth day you gathered, but there was a line in there that said, essentially, and I know I'm not quoting it exactly, but they that gathered much didn't have excess, and those that didn't gather as much didn't go without. So in other words, it was enough for everyone, okay?
Right.
Now, in our culture here, that would say, well, that smacks of communism. Because if you get yours, then
Right.
you don't care about the other person. They should have.
Yes.
But the premise there was the manna was there, and it was enough for everyone to be taken care of.
Right.
Okay? So those that gather too much would have a mindset, okay, we have enough. We can't eat more. Let's give to others.
Yes.
Okay? Now, I'm clearly not advocating a financial or I'm not going there at all. But what I'm saying is, it's the mindset that your motivation is to help others.
Yeah, here's what we can do with that. And I'm glad you brought it up because I look at the things that I'm not satisfied with in our culture and what can I personally do to make them better. The way that we handle our benevolence is a key. I know what I'm doing, okay, and I'm not asking anybody else what they are doing. But here's what I know. I know from experience, and I could go back and give you certain situations where I don't know how we did it, but we were able to be benevolent when it was really tough, and then later on receive a blessing. Now, isn't it ironic that that has always worked that way for me for my whole life? Now, I didn't document a lot of it. I have a few situations where I could say, wow, look at how this happened. But here's the deal. If everyone would realize the value of that and how important it is, our society would be far better off. there wouldn't be the amount of homelessness that there is right now. There probably wouldn't be as much crime either,
Mhm.
you know? But it's funny, you talk about 2008. I remember 2007 and 8 because that was a hard time for us. We had we had taken all of Diana's savings from GM, and we had borrowed an additional $50,000 to invest in an organization that we thought, and I actually had other men from church that were good businessmen counsel me and say, "What do you think? Should I do that?" I got everybody gave me a pat on the back and some of them wanted to be a part of it too. If they could. So we do this, and the company goes belly up after a year.
Hmm.
Now here we are. This is really neat, okay? Because what I've learned is I learned what it's like to truly go broke and come back from it. And I can't tell you how we did it other than through our faith. Because during that time, and this was before technology was at the point it is right now. You're talking about 2007, 2008. And I had a client who was an attorney, and I said, "Glenn, what do I do?" He said, "Well, number one, stop answering the phone." Okay. I never claimed bankruptcy. And there's two things that we did continually that I believe are the reason why we pulled out of it without being able to explain why. We continued to tithe, and we made our house payment on time. That's it. I almost had the cars taken away. I mean, it was really like, wow, but we never worried about it. I just knew. And back then, I don't know what my credit rating went down to, but it was really, really low. And when I leased my last Subaru, I said, "I'm curious, what was my credit rating?" I said 812.
Oh, wow.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Diana's was only in the high 700s.
That's still good.
But it's still, yeah, and I'm thinking, and that was like, okay, 2007 and 8 to 2023.
Yeah.
So a number of years. But what we did is we did what we knew would be pleasing to the Lord.
Right.
It works.
Rich, and what you said there just verifies the fact that mammon, as the scripture says, really should be used only as a means to really glorify God. In the end, that's really what it should be used for.
Yep.
Because
I do.
when you said you didn't worry,
No, I didn't.
that's glorifying God.
Yes.
And a lot of times people don't see it that way. But you're glorifying God because you are resting in your faith
Yeah.
and your understanding in Him. And so even though you understood that money is important, like you said earlier, it didn't drive you.
No.
And because it didn't own you, you were able to be pleasing in the sight of the Lord.
Right.
And so then money became something that you used to get back to where you needed to be.
Yeah.
Because we need it, but we have to make sure we don't allow it to control us. And so our motivation has to always be towards the things that are consistent with the character and nature of God. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Well, it's interesting because it was shortly after that I had a triple bypass. And I didn't have a Medicare Part C.
Mm-hmm.
When it was all said and done, I owe the hospital $20,000. And I stopped getting notices. I never paid it back. And nobody ever asked for it. I had another clinic that I used that we owed $600, and she said, "We already had enough. You don't have to worry about it." This is the stuff I'm talking about, that I can't explain that, but that really happened to us. What can I say?
I think that what you're saying means a lot to me, because I've experienced the same type of things multiple times as well. And you can only say that it's definitely a miracle from from God.
And I'm not trying to manipulate the system or anything
No,
like that.
understood that.
It's just that,
Doors are
folks, this really happened to us. And I can't explain why.
open. Right. You said you said something a second ago about complaining. You complain, but you used another word. I can't remember right now. But you said complaining earlier, and I'm thinking more and more. If you want to frustrate God, the eternal one, if you really want to frustrate him, complain, murmur, murmur and complain.
Yeah.
And the scripture tells us that it says you have to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God. Why? For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. And the next verse says, do all things without murmurings and disputings, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? Because when you complain, that means that there's somethingmissing. When you complain, that means that there's something lacking that you want, right? And sometimes that want does not align with what God has determined.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I was thinking about what frustration, the way I identify frustration is wanting something to be different and not knowing how to make it different. And when we can't figure it out and we stay in that rut, that's the time to learn, really.
Good stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, so much has to do with what our intentions are and understanding what does please God. You know, I'll tell you why I don't worry, and I really do not worry. I don't know when it occurred, but it was years ago. Is it in Matthew that says don't worry about, or in the Beatitudes where it says not to worry? When I read that, I stopped worrying. I'm serious. That was the turning point.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not supposed to worry. Okay, I'm done. I'm not worrying anymore.
How do you see? That's the thing. Like, how do you teach that to people? Because the thing is this. This is one thing. Because you have a definition. You look at something as simple as that in Scripture, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then you say in your mind, you said that means something. If it's telling me to do this, why should I do it? For other people, it's hard for other people to do the same thing. And every once in a while, you know, I'm not saying that
my faith is more important than my will.
There you go.
That's really it. You know, when we talk about the substance of faith, that's one of it.
Yeah.
If you're going to claim faith, practice it. Prove it. Don't prove it because you want to say I can, but no, prove it in your heart. You know, that to me is it.
But that's it's easy for Rich to say that, but how do you convey that to others? You know what I'm saying?
You know, that's you know what it was to me? And I was telling this to Henry, you know Henry, you met the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm really happy that I don't have a massive education. You know why? I had to teach myself how to think and value things, not take what other people said. I had to think and value. So I had to figure it out. How does it work for Rich? And what I learned is it is so simple if you trust the Word of God. It really is. The question is, how do you get somebody to want to put their trust in God really more than they want to be in control of themselves? And I don't know how to tell someone to use it. All I could tell you was, number one, it's simple, it's not complicated, and it works. But, you know, you have to have it. That's who I am. That's the way it really is. No fake, you know?
Well, you know, Scripture says God's testimonies are sure, right? Meaning he has told us that if we follow the path that he's laid out, we will see benefit from it. And so then here comes Rich in this case, reading it, accepting it, and then acting upon it.
Yeah.
Okay? So then now, how do you get someone else who's not there yet? Because that's really what you're getting at. How do you get them? Well, we have to make sure that we don't, in our mind, have the thought, because I know it's right, I just tell somebody, and therefore they should get it and then do it.
Well, you know, James, I think part of it is to be able to, you know, I should have journaled more. Years ago, I was told, Rich, journal. and I didn't keep track of things, but here's the deal. Like the episodes I just talked about last week with busing tables, the kid that was wondering about motivation. These are things I didn't write down, and 2 months from now, I probably won't remember them. But what it takes is I have to be able to share with you real life stories that occurred to prove the authenticity of my faith. And when we could do that is when people listen.
Yes.
One of the reasons I love to listen to Andrew Womack, you ought to hear the stuff that he's accomplished with his faith. It's like, wow. And these are the real stuff, So I think that's part of it, is you have to be able to, I guess if I was going to try to convince somebody to have the same heart and understanding that to get to where I feel I am with the Lord, what it takes is they have to be willing to practice it. They have to be willing to, even when you don't get what you think you should get, in return.